You are listening to the Day by Day podcast for the first week of April, 2017. Welcome to the Day by Day podcast with me, Siobhan. This week we'll look at an observance that's stirring up a lot of controversy, don our kilts, and toast the noble experiment goodbye. Now let's get right to it. April is Confederate History Month, currently observed in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. Virginia no longer observes Confederate History Month, and Arkansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee, which were part of the Confederacy, do not take part in the observance. The month-long observance recognizes the history of the Confederate States of America. This is understandably a controversial topic due to the Confederate States' views on slavery. Now for a history lesson on the Confederate States of America. In November 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. In February 1861, before he took office, a new Confederate government was established. The Confederacy was originally formed by 7 states: South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These states' economies were largely dependent on agriculture, mostly cotton, and a plantation system that relied upon the forced labor of black slaves. Incoming President Lincoln's platform opposed the expansion of slavery. Shortly after taking office in March of 1861, the Civil War began, and 4 more states, those being Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, also declared their secession and joined the Confederacy. Parts of Missouri and Kentucky claimed allegiance to the Confederacy, while the governments of those 2 states retained formal adherence to the Union. Also fighting for the Confederacy were the Choctaw and Chickasaw tribes, while a majority of the Cherokee tribe was loyal to the Confederacy. Maryland and Delaware also saw division in their loyalties. A Unionist government in the western part of Virginia organized the new state of West Virginia and was admitted to the Union during the war. As the Union seized victories in the Civil War, Confederate control over its claimed territories steadily declined, and freed slaves joined the Union ranks as soldiers, teamsters, and laborers. The Confederate infrastructure, including railroads, telegraph lines, and bridges, was also weakened. In April 1865, the Confederate capital of Richmond was captured by Union forces, leading to the surrender of General Lee and effectively collapsing the Confederacy. Thus, the majority of the Confederacy's existence was marked by war, and it took decades for the South to rebuild. Those opposed to commemorating Confederate History Month assert that it glorifies a time when slavery was acceptable, and many view the Confederacy as a symbol of hatred. Proponents of Confederate History Month remind us that not all Southerners supported slavery, and many fought for the Confederacy not to preserve slavery, but to defend the dignity of the South against the perceived arrogance of the North. In a recent op-ed piece for Savannah Now, the writer states that if we are to honor the valor, bravery, and sacrifices of the Confederates, we must also acknowledge the cruelty, degradation, and inhumanity of the institution, which was the Confederacy's founding principle. Confederate history is American history, and as George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So I'll let you decide for yourself whether or not Confederate history should be observed in the month of April or ever.
Ball game, take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
This week is one of my favorite and most exciting times of the year, baseball's opening week. I discussed opening day last year on the podcast, but it's so special to me that I wanted to cover it again. While the official opening day is Monday, April 3rd, 3 regular games are taking place the day before. Monday will see 12 games in action. Opening day represents a fresh start, a season full of possibilities. Every team starts with a 0-0 record, and every team has the same chance of reaching the World Series.
Opening day is waking up refreshed from a long winter nap. It's walking up the ramp to your first sunlit field. It's the first hat over a heart, the first sweep of home plate. It's the first windup, the first pitch, and the first swing and a miss. It's zeros across the board, the first shot across the sky. It's hope restored. It's a chase renewed. Opening day is nothing to lose and nowhere to go but up. It's the dream of repeating or completing the job nearly done. It's an intriguing news story, sharing headlines with a storied pair. It's when waiting till next year officially ends and improving on last year begins. And that's opening day. It's stars and it's stripes. It's the first day of the rest of your life. Opening day is here.
The Cincinnati Reds were the first Major League Baseball team, and for decades they had the honor of opening the openers. They were the first team to play on opening day. Sadly, that's no longer the tradition, as the Reds game starts on Monday at 4:10 Eastern Time. They are the only team to still start every season at home. In 1940, the Cleveland Indians' Bob Feller threw the only no-hitter in opening day history. The longest opening day game was in 2012 between the Cleveland Indians and the Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays beat the Indians 7-4 in 16 innings. The pitcher with the most opening day starts was Tom Seaver, who started 16 times. 12 sitting U.S. presidents have thrown out the first pitch on opening day. President Donald Trump will not be continuing that tradition as he has declined the Nationals' invitation to throw out the first pitch this Monday, which, by the way, is the first game. Marlins at Nationals at 1:05. This Thursday, April 6th, is Tartan Day, a celebration of Scottish heritage. The first known Tartan Day was July 1st, 1982 in New York as a one-time celebration of the 200th anniversary of the repeal of the Act of Proscription, which forbids Scots to wear tartan. On March 9th, 1986, a Tartan Day to promote Scottish heritage in Canada was proposed, and a year later, Nova Scotia was the first to recognize April 6th as Tartan Day. April 6th was chosen as it is the anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320, which confirmed Scotland's status as an independent sovereign state. The United States has recognized April 6th as Tartan Day since 1998, and today it is celebrated throughout North America, Scotland, and many other countries. Tartan is the crisscross pattern of horizontal and vertical bands in multiple colors. Tartan is often called plaid in North America, but in Scotland, a plaid is a tartan cloth slung over the shoulder as a kilt accessory, or a plain ordinary blanket that you would have on a bed. Tartans originated in woven wool, but now they are made in many other materials. The idea that the various colors used in tartan have a specific meaning is purely a modern one. It is only recently created tartans, such as Canadian provincial and territorial tartans, beginning in the 50s, and US, beginning in the 80s, that are designed with certain symbolic meaning for the colors used. Yes, Canada and the US have their own specific tartans, including one for each province and state. Even Elvis Presley has at least 3 tartans attributed to his name. Japan is one of the biggest fans of tartan outside of Scotland. Hello Kitty has her own tartan design. It is generally regarded that clan tartans date no earlier than the beginning of the 19th century and are an example of an invented tradition. The naming and registration of official clan tartans began on April 8, 1815. Today, tartan and clan tartan is an important part of a Scottish clan. Almost all Scottish clans have several tartans attributed to their name. Several clans have official tartans. Although it is possible for anyone to create a tartan and name it any name they wish, the only person with the authority to make a clan's tartan official is the chief. In case you're wondering, the most expensive tartan is reportedly created by Holland and Sherry. It is a luxury blend woven from Mongolian cashmere, and it is about 500 pounds sterling per square meter, or would be about $6,000 for an entire kilt. You can view thousands of tartan designs and search for the Elvis and Hello Kitty, and even your family tartan, at tartanregister.gov.uk, the Scottish Register of Tartans. Also visit rampantscotland.com for Tartan Day events near you and around the world.
The decisive vote of the 36th state against prohibition is happy news for the grain raisers of the United States and for many others throughout the land. With an eye on December 5th, work is being rushed in distilleries and bottling works. Thousands are being called back to work in plants of allied industries. At least 500,000 new jobs are predicted as the result of repeal. From keg and barrel factories, perhaps the most closely allied line, immediate benefits from repeal extend into almost every line of business and commerce. However, everyone's not waiting until December 15th. The lid is off in many places, with the downfall of prohibition being celebrated in real old-time hilarity. Yes, and by the renewal of old acquaintance. Hotels and nightclubs report a real pre-war spirit among those revelers. Boy! Uh-oh! There'll be no more scenes such as this. Barrel after barrel of prize whiskeys destroyed by government agents. It's going to be a cold winter for the barrel busters.
This Friday, April 7th, is National Beer Day in the U.S. National Beer Day was first created in 2009 by Justin Smith of Richmond, Virginia. After much prodding from a friend, Justin started a Facebook page that was noticed by Colorado beer examiner Eli Shayatovic. Justin's promoting of the new holiday through various social media outlets was rewarded when the beer drinking app Untappd created a badge for National Beer Day that rewarded participants that checked a beer into the app on April 7th. National Beer Day has since been trending every year on April 7th using the hashtag National Beer Day. By the way, April 6th is known as New Beer's Eve. National Beer Day is celebrated on April 7th because it is the day in 1933 when the Cullin-Harrison Act went into effect, which led to the ratification of the 21st Amendment and the repeal of the 18th Amendment. Cullin-Harrison, 18th Amendment, 21st? What is this all about? Well, let's go over the history of prohibition in the U.S. During the 19th century, alcoholism, domestic violence, and saloon-based political corruption prompted activists to create a temperance movement to end the alcoholic beverage trade. Temperance advocates promised that prohibition would usher in a beautiful new world. Crime, poverty, violence, marital abuse, industrial injuries, sickness, and premature death would all go down. In their place would be prosperity, less violence, fewer injuries, better health, and greater longevity. Many communities introduced alcohol prohibition on a local level, and eventually state after state mandated prohibition. On November 18, 1918, the U.S. Congress passed the temporary Wartime Prohibition Act, which banned the sale of alcoholic beverages having an alcohol content of greater than 1.28%. In January 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified as part of the Constitution and effectively established the prohibition of alcoholic beverages. It declared the production, transport, and sale of alcohol illegal, but not the consumption or private possession. Then, in October 1919, Congress passed the National Prohibition Act, popularly known as the Volstead Act, and it went into effect January 17, 1920. The act established the legal definition of intoxicating liquors as well as penalties for producing them. Although the Volstead Act prohibited the sale of alcohol, the federal government lacked resources to enforce it. While prohibition was successful in reducing the amount of liquor consumed, it stimulated the proliferation of rampant, underground, organized, and widespread criminal activity, which also affected innocent citizens. Drinking bootleg alcohol paralyzed, blinded, or killed people, as there were sometimes toxins in the illegally produced alcohol. And legally produced alcohol for industrial purposes intentionally had toxins added to it to discourage its consumption. But people still drank it. On average, 1,000 Americans died every year during Prohibition from effects of drinking tainted liquor. At the national level, Prohibition cost the federal government a total of $11 billion in lost tax revenue, while costing over $300 million to enforce. The law that was meant to foster temperance instead fostered excess. The solution the United States had devised to address the problem of alcohol abuse had instead made the problem even worse. The statistics of the period are unreliable, but it is very clear that in many parts of the United States, more people were drinking, and people were drinking more. And it was clear that Prohibition was not working. On March 22, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed into law an amendment to the Volstead Act known as the Cullin-Harrison Act, which legalized the sale of beer with an alcohol content of 3.2% and wine of similarly low alcohol content, thought to be too low to be intoxicating. It went into effect on April 7, 1933. Upon signing the amendment, President Roosevelt remarked, "I think this would be a good time for a beer." On April 7, 1933, 1.5 million barrels of beer were consumed, setting a precedence for what later would become National Beer Day. On December 5, 1933, the ratification of the 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment. Though I did not live during Prohibition, the biggest takeaway for me is that you cannot legislate morality. Grand Central Terminal is offering many National Beer Day specials. Be on the lookout for deals and discounts near you. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week. Until then, remember to make each day count.